The Chargers need help at wide receiver, and both Jim Harbaugh and Joe Hortiz have now said in the media that they're looking at help in the draft as well as free agency. And now the reports are coming out that the Chargers are one of 5 teams that are interested in signing Tyler Boyd. So make sure to like and subscribe if you do enjoy this content, bro. It helps me out so much. And let's get to know Tyler Boyd first of all. So as soon as Keenan Allen was traded, I went live and I started to look at some free agent wide receivers that the Chargers could get in order to replicate what Keenan Allen did in this offense. And obviously, you're not going to be able to find anyone that is as good as Keenan is and does what he can do at his level. But I was looking for someone with that same kind of skill set, and I didn't really care about the money because I was like, we just saved over $20 million in this Keenan Allen trade to get that 4th round pick, so we can spend the money. And I found 2 guys that I thought would make some sense and they would be, realistic options for the Chargers. And they're both still available in free agency. First one, Tyler Boyd, obviously, but also Michael Thomas. And then I know Hunter Renfrow, he's still available, but I don't think that would be good value, and he wasn't able to see the field a lot for some reason with the Raiders, so I think something weird is going on there that we don't really know. And plus, if you're going for a guy like him, I would rather just get younger and more athletic at wide receiver over taking a flyer on him. He's 28 years old. But anyways, Michael Thomas was the other guy. He's 31 years old, and he's projected to be more expensive than Tyler Boyd. So that would be the less valuable option at wide receiver. Tyler Boyd would be the go-to guy. And Tyler Boyd, he is 29 years old, and he's projected to sign for just over $8 million a year, and he's probably going to get like a multi-year deal, either 2 or 3 years. He is a big slot wide receiver. He is 6'2", over 200 pounds. He's not a speedster, but he's a very reliable target, just like Keenan was. And he only had 3 drops this past season. And the 2 years prior to that, each year, he only had 1 drop. So that is 5 total drops in these past 3 years in the NFL. And he was rarely lined up out wide. He was used in the slot for the vast majority of his time in Cincinnati. Not a real big yak guy. I mean, he can make some guys miss. He had 11 missed tackles forced this past season, but he's a great route runner and can create separation, especially because he's such a big guy that can play in the slot. And that alone creates mismatches against defenses, because typically a defense, they're going to have a small nickel corner. And also sometimes in the defense, you're going to have a big kind of like box linebacker that you slide out there, or you just rotate one of your safeties down. And typically a linebacker or a safety, they're not going to be able to match up well with the quickness and the speed of a wide receiver. So just his size alone at wide receiver and the ability to play in the slot, it makes him a really good weapon for any team in the NFL, really. And the downside with him is that he is 29 years old, and he's going to be 30 about halfway through this season. He's also going to cost at least $8 million a year. And the biggest issue for me is that he's just not a true wide receiver 1. I mean, Tyler Boyd was wide receiver 3 for the Bengals during his entire career, playing behind T. Higgins and Jamar Chase, obviously. But like I said, he was used in the slot way more than on the outside, playing that X receiver position, which is what we need. He had 3,671 snaps lined up in the slot and 805 lined up out wide. Slot receivers, they're very valuable, don't get me wrong, but I just don't think that the Chargers should spend that much money on one that is turning 30 years old this season. I mean, just look at the way that they have approached free agency this far. It doesn't really follow the path of what they have been doing. They've been getting low money players that have potential and are young, like a guy like Christian Fulton. Or they go for low money players that bring a specific skill set and are trustworthy veterans. Look at Denzel Perryman. He brings that run defense. And then look at Gus Edwards. He brings that boom, Gus the bus. Short yardage situations, hand it off to him, he's going to get 3 yards. And then even like Will Dissly. That dude is a run blocking tight end through and through. Don't throw that guy the ball. You want him to run block. And also Tyler Boyd, he's coming off his worst season this past year, and that's going to bring down his value in free agency. His yards per route run was 71st in the NFL at 1.15. For some perspective here, Josh Palmer was a lot better at 1.71, But that still, I mean, that was 39th in the league. And I don't expect his value to go down so much that it would be like a really good deal to sign him. That's because there's still 5 teams that are interested in him. And it's the Chiefs, Dolphins, the Lions, the Niners, and the Chargers. All of those teams are like competing this year, including the Chargers, right? Hopefully. That is going to drive up his price a lot because these teams are going to be fighting against each other to sign him. I'm worried that if the Chargers are able to get him, that it's not going to be good value anymore because it'll be a bloated contract, which, don't get me wrong, we do have the money to go out and sign a wide receiver like this. But again, we just got rid of 2 wide receivers that were better than Tyler Boyd because of a bloated contract and wanting to spend that money elsewhere on this team in order to build depth on the roster. And like Joe Hortiz said, man, churn the bottom of the roster with good players. They want to disperse the money around and not sign these flashy players in free agency because they want to have depth on this team. And I'd imagine that they're interested in him to an extent, in the same way that they wanted Keenan Allen on this team to an extent. They wanted him to take that pay cut, and they're probably going to offer Tyler Boyd less money than what he could get on one of those other teams like the Lions or the Chiefs. And also, I don't really think it makes sense like roster construction wise. I mean, yeah, the money isn't really right and it doesn't follow the trend of what they have been doing this offseason in free agency. But also, I'm sure it surprised us all that they got rid of both of those big name wide receivers. But why spend big on a slot wide receiver when you might have one on the roster already? I mean, I think that Josh Palmer and Darius Davis, they're both capable wide receivers that can play in the slot. And mostly Josh Palmer, to be honest with you. I have more confidence in him to play in the slot because he's a big wide receiver as well, just like Tyler Boyd, 6'2", over 200 pounds. But Josh Palmer, he is faster. He is younger, and his route running, it's not as good as Tyler Boyd, but he's still a pretty good route runner. He played 440 snaps in the slot this past year, in his career rather, and 927 snaps out wide. So he has that position versatility that Tyler Boyd doesn't have. So he can be put out anywhere on the field at wide receiver. Plus, he graded better than Tyler Boyd this past year, and he had more yards after catch per reception and a better contested catch percentage. Plus, he is still on that rookie contract, so he cost a fraction of what Tyler Boyd would cost you in free agency. Do you see what I mean? Like, we already have a guy that can fit that role of what Tyler Boyd would be on this roster. It doesn't cost you any more money. He is younger. He is more athletic. He's more versatile. And he's better after the catch and in the contested catch. But on top of that, how many times are we going to be running a 3 wide receiver set in this offense? Greg Roman and Jim Harbaugh, they both freaking love their tight ends, and they are going to utilize those 2 to 3 tight end sets. I know I've been saying that a lot, but I really want to get that across because that means that the positional value of tight end is higher for the Chargers than it has been these past few years. You see what I'm saying? So how many times would your wide receiver 3 and wide receiver 4 be on the field over some of your tight ends like tight end 2 and 3, maybe even tight end 4? I just don't know how many times they're going to be running that heavy formation with all of those tight ends. And these 3 to 4 wide receiver sets, I think it's going to be very, very slim pickings there. So on top of everything that I just said, like schematically, it really wouldn't make a ton of sense to spend that much money on a wide receiver 3 because like how often are you going to be throwing him out there per game? Is he going to be out there like half the time, 60% of the time? Because keep in mind, if the Chargers do sign Tyler Boyd, immediately he's going to be the most expensive skill position player on this offense. The most expensive player on offense, really, outside of Justin Herbert. And he's wide receiver 3. I don't see it happening. If they wanted a true wide receiver 1, they wouldn't really be looking in free agency anymore at this point. I think they'd be looking at the draft because also they have a meeting scheduled with Malik Nabers. I think it was on Thursday, maybe it was on Wednesday, it was something like that. But they're going to be meeting with him. So are the Cardinals. And Malik Nabers, that dude is a wide receiver 1. And he's way younger, way more athletic, has much better yards after catch ability, better in the contested catch. that guy's a real good route runner. He can be your X receiver if you stick at 5. But also, this draft class is so deep at wide receiver, you can get a wide receiver 1 in like rounds 2 or 3. And if you want a guy that can play in the slot, you can get that in like day 3 of the draft in this year. A guy that I really like is Brenden Rice. He also has that positional versatility, can play in the slot as well as outside. So you have a guy that is like Josh Palmer and Brenden Rice and Quentin Johnston. I think all of these guys can play outside or in the slot. Hopefully we're going to see a big resurgence out of Quentin Johnston. I just really think wide receiver is a premier position. They're going to want to hit this in the draft. There's not a really good, valuable wide receiver that they can take in free agency that makes sense the way that they have been going about the offseason thus far. And I know that wide receiver is still a huge need on this team, but I just don't think Tyler Boyd is the guy because he counts against the comp pick formula with a huge contract that is going to cancel out all of the great work that Joe Hortiz has done so far in acquiring those comp picks for this next year. He's old and slow at a premier position that they want to address in the draft. Like I was just talking about with Malik Nabers. This guy, Tyler Boyd, not a wide receiver 1, which is the reason that you need a wide receiver, because you need a wide receiver 1. You don't have that on the roster at the moment, but you do have a guy that can kind of give you what Tyler Boyd gives you if you utilize him in that way with Josh Palmer. In my opinion, this move, it would just be adding competition for Quentin Johnston and Josh Palmer rather than adding a guy to complement that wide receiver room and elevate it with the guys that we have right now. And if the Chargers do trade down in the draft, that doesn't mean that they can't get a wide receiver 1. Because actually in my video yesterday, I did a trade down scenario, did 3 mock drafts, got a really good wide receiver in the first round.